Even one down the sideline, and he's got Cass over the top. Big side. Down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, and welcome to the recap of the North Carolina Central UCLA game on the Bruin Bible here for the LA Football Network. To my right, my co-host, my main man, the madman, back in the house, Jamal. Had to be at a wedding last night. It's wedding season for myself and Jamal. We love all the people that invite us to weddings. It's been great, but it just hurts a little bit as we can't always watch our UCLA football. You know, he helped me out the weekend before with me texting him about, San Diego State. I stood in this time and shot him text messages about what's going on for UCLA. First and foremost, how was the wedding, madman, that you were able to attend this fine weekend?
Well, thanks so much, Thriller. And it was, just an epic wedding and, some very close friends or practically family. So it's always a very special time when everyone gets together, as I know you've experienced the last couple of weeks and will continue to experience, next week and beyond as well. So couldn't be happier. I will say, I'm not sure what game had more fireworks, what event had more fireworks. Was it the wedding in terms of all the dancing, the Bollywood dancing, or UCLA with their 8 touchdowns, largely many of which were untouched. So it was fireworks in both places. Ironically, the wedding was in Pasadena, so I was only a couple blocks away.
Man, so a party for Jamal to be at the wedding. It was a party in the end zone. 8 touchdowns, as you mentioned, man. 404 yards on the ground as a team. And a lot of guys that we hadn't seen in a while, Justin Martin getting his first snaps, Chase Griffin getting his first snaps in a long while. Anthony Adkins' first touches as a Bruin in a UCLA uniform, who we'll get to later. But we got to start off as we always do. Dante Moore, man. This kid, just the poise and precision, it's something unlike anything I've ever seen from a true freshman donning UCLA, colors that we have. Even with Brett Hundley, man, he was a redshirt. He had a year to kind of figure it out. He waited, got his redshirt year, and came out exploding. Dante's, a fresh, spry 18 years old doing what he's doing right now. And the first play of the game, 67 yards on play action to Cam Brown, just to have the eyes and manipulation that he did to hit his man in stride. The first offensive series for North Carolina Central, Laiatu Latu intercepts the pass, nearly takes it to the house, man. He was ready to get that touchdown dance going, similar to the Bollywood dancers that you guys saw at the wedding, man. Carson Steele punches in from 1 yard. Carson Steele looked really good out there. Talk to me about what that was, because 35 points in the first quarter actually broke a UCLA record, breaking the 30 that they put up on Washington State in 2012. Just a masterclass offensive performance for UCLA to start that one, Madman.
Yeah, Will, I think you said it best. There's a couple things here to unpack. I mean, you talked about the 35 points in the first quarter, which was staggering. And you could tell they sort of called off the dogs after the first quarter. I mean, it was only 24 points after that. UCLA could have scored 100 in that game yesterday if they wanted to. But, really classy move to kind of call off the dogs. Couple things really stood out for me, Will. One, you mentioned just the professionalism to take care of business. You're a 35-point favorite. You're playing an FCS team, an HBCU. Just recall this time last year, South Alabama was an FCS team. South Alabama was an HBCU. And it took the very last play of the game to pull off a field goal to win that game 32-31. UCLA came out and had no such difficulties here. You talked about Dante Moore, very first play of the game. Cam Brown was so wide open, Will, he almost fell down. He was so surprised he was that wide open, for 67 yards to the house. Then obviously the interception with Latu, one play, they punch it in with Steele. And then to me, that third score was the highlight of the whole game. It was that 30-yard out route to Sturdivant. Will, I'll be honest with you, that was an NFL throw if I've ever seen an NFL throw. And I'll go one step further. It might have been the greatest single throw I've seen a UCLA quarterback have probably since the Rosen Texas A&M game where he did the fake Dan Marino and threw back shoulder to Lasley for the game winner there. But in terms of single throw That was absolutely staggering. And then you talked about everybody kind of getting in on the act, whether it was Steele, whether it was Harden. Each of them had very nice long touchdown runs. I think the Steele one, off that right edge and went down the sideline, had the closing speed to finish it off. Harden's was down the left sideline going the other end zone. And just those two cutbacks, Will, inside the 30-yard line just showed what a special athlete he is. Schlee got involved with the quarterback keeper going deep. So it was really incredible to see everyone get involved. But I think Chip tipped his hand so much in this game because if you look at it, Dante Moore was the only one who actually really threw the ball in this game. 8 of 12, the 180-plus yards, the 2 touchdowns. Of all the other quarterbacks that played, Ethan Garbers had 1 completion, Schlee had 1 completion, and then it was sort of exclusively run game for 2.5 quarters to end that game. So if there's any doubt as to who's the man here, Dante, it's no question. This is going to be his team moving forward without a doubt. But very proud of the effort overall. They took care of business. They got a lot of guys involved, and this is the perfect setup now getting into conference season and particularly getting into Utah.
Yeah, and that's how you want your team to look going into arguably the biggest game, not USC, of the season. Traveling to Rice-Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake City, being prepared for a big moment with the 2-time defending Pac-12 champs, with the weapons at their arsenal and what they've got at the quarterback position. I was going to go in a variety of different directions, but you kind of touched on it. Are you ready to declare Collin Schlee as the backup quarterback? Because I think from what we've seen with his packages, he had 2 carries for 35 yards against San Diego State, 3 carries for 60 yards, and that 50-yard touchdown he had on the sidelines. I just think what he can bring in terms of his offensive skill set and what he makes the defense prepare for, given his starting prowess too and what he has done at the Division I level, I think I'm ready to put him at backup quarterback. It does happen to Dante. Do you agree with that sentiment given what we saw this past Saturday?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, how you think about them. I actually think about them kind of as like this Venn diagram, if you will, where, it's unfortunate for Garbers that he's not as good a thrower as Dante, and he's not as good a runner as Schlee. So he's sort of lost in this no man's land. But I think we're in a position here with Schlee where he's definitely going to be that running quarterback in certain situations. And I think, Will, you alluded to this, and it took me a couple of weeks to kind of get there, but you talked about that 2006 Florida team where Chris Leak was the starting quarterback. Recall, Chris Leak was a younger guy at that stage as well, and Tebow was just sort of a package quarterback in the red zone and goal line short yardage situations. I actually see a scenario where that is more likely here. It's going to be Dante all the way. I think Schlee's going to come in 3rd and short, 4th and short, inside the red zone. Certain situations where you need that down and distance, where you need that quarterback to be a threat on the ground as well as your running game to kind of come in there. And I think that's where he finds his niche. Now, do I think Schlee is capable of being QB2? I'm not sold quite yet. I mean, let's recall here, Will, he, in a game like this, he still had as many receptions to the other team than he did his own team. I mean, he was 1 for 4 with an interception. So I don't think that really screams confidence as a thrower. I think if there was ever a situation where, God forbid, something happened to Dante, I still think Chip will go to Garbers as like the QB2. But I think we're moving forward into a situation here where it's clearly Dante's team, and Schlee's going to get some usage in certain packages, and Garbers is going to be sitting there with the clipboard until something happens, God forbid, to Moore to kind of get back in it. So I think Garbers is sort of rotationally 3, but he's still QB2. And I think Schlee is rotationally 2 as a package, but he's still QB3, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think just from what we've able to see with him, I think we're going to see more of Schlee this year than Garbers moving forward if everybody's healthy. And it just, Chip's at his best when he keeps the defense off balance. What better than just throwing in a Schlee package?
Exactly.
1 or 2 possessions where the defense now has to prepare for a totally different side of a quarterback than what they were used to when it came down to it. Running backs, man. We had 5 running backs. Well, 4 running backs with a 6 being the quarterback with 60 yards or more rushing. Anthony Adkins, this is really the first taste we got to see of him. He had a bumbling run up the middle, broke 3 tackles on a 38-yard gain for a 245-pound tailback. Got the touchdown at the goal line. Friend of the show, to our guy Anthony Adkins, came on the show. What'd you see from Ant? Because I'm excited to see maybe a little bit more of him come Pac-12 play. And, that style of physical running really transcends the Big Ten. If you've seen some of these bigger backs over the years, these Ron Danes, these Le'Veon Bell type of backs, these bigger, stronger, brute force backs. Give me more Adkins, man. I'm ready for it.
Absolutely, Will. I mean, it was great to see. We got a little bit of an appetizer of Anthony Adkins in the second half of that San Diego State game where he had 5 carries for 25 yards. But really to get the main course this week was really awesome to see. And you mentioned that big 38-yarder where he just bounced off of guys and just was steamrolling them down the middle of the field. And then obviously got the opportunity to finish that drive with the 1-yard touchdown. What I love about him, Will, is, it's that in-between tackle situation. And I think there's going to be packages here on the road in challenging environments where Adkins is going to play a huge role. We saw a taste of it against San Diego State when they lined up in that T formation, when they had Yankoff and Adkins and Steele on the field. And I think there's going to be more such packages when you go up into Utah, when you go up into Corvallis, when you got to have it on 4th down against SC because you're going shot for shot. So I think, again, Adkins is going to be one of those guys where I see him sort of jumping the rotation and being kind of RB3 at this stage, given what he does really well. I think what's fascinating, Will, is that Adkins and Schlee, to me, it's sort of the same principle that Chip is using right now at different positions. He's basically saying, who is my best overall athlete? Who's my best player at the position? But then beyond that, beyond who's going to be at the top of that rotation, I'm really looking for specialists. I don't really want someone who's kind of good in a lot of different things, but is going to kind of get beaten out overall. I want my overall number 1, number 2 guy, and then I want a bunch of specialists. And when you think about Schlee as a specialist QB with his package, when you think about Adkins as a specialist running back with his package, it sort of leaves some of the Ethan Garbers of the world, the Colson Yankoffs of the world, unfortunately, out of the rotation because they generally overall might be better players. But if they're not the best at something, I think Chip is really prioritizing that in terms of these packages moving forward. So as a result of that, I think Adkins is going to get a lot more playing time in some critical moments in these bigger games down the line. I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah, and we talked about Carson Steele, man. 5 carries, 83 yards, had that 42-yard run for a touchdown where they did the T formation, which I think we got to bring more of that, just knowing how much talent we have in the backfield and trying to get all these guys on the field. I mean, Colson Yankoff, we kind of allude to it, RB4 at this point. He had 6 carries, 61 yards, and a touchdown in his own right. This guy was averaging 10 yards a carry. That's a first down every time he touches the ball mathematically. So talk to me about Carson Steele because I think this was his finest moment thus far as being a Bruin. I have always been on the train of TJ Harden, and he really is that home run threat when it comes to Harden. The 62-yard run, that was a thing of beauty, cutting back, making guys miss. He is a speedster on the field. But Carson Steele, man, I really think this is really trending towards more of an RB1, RB1A type of scenario where they're both going to be kind of at the top because Steele really, really impressed the last couple of weeks for me.
For sure, Will. And I think you hit it on the nail. I think it's going to be a two-headed monster here, and I think as Bruin fans, we've gotten a little bit spoiled the last couple of years with just who's been back there. And it's been very, very clear who RB1 has been in years past when you've got the likes of Charbonnet, when you've got the likes of a Joshua Kelly, when you've got the likes of these huge backs that can take on the bulk of the load. I think this year is going to be much more of a two-headed monster, to your point. And I think what success looks like is each of these guys is going to get between 10 and 15 carries a game. And that's where you're going to get that 20 to 30 in terms of lather. Love what I saw out of Steele. Was happy to see that he had just enough giddy up to get it into the end zone there on that long touchdown. It was close, but he got there. And I think, again, he is that boxer analogy, Will, in terms of the body blows. He just gives those defenses those body blows. He's physical. He loves to sort of run up the middle. He loves contact. He's a guy who's always looking for contact, always falling forward. All of his stylistic elements that he brought to Ball State are carrying over. My only concern with Steele as the ultimate back is just the athleticism and the speed at a Division I level. But, oh, by the way, that's why you have a TJ Harden, because he does his strengths in many ways are Steele's weaknesses. And Harden maybe not as necessarily as physical a back are what Steele's strengths are. So they complement each other so well. I completely agree with you. I love what I'm seeing out of him. And you can clearly see, I think, the other element here with Steele that's going to play a big role down the line is ball security. When you see him sort of carry the ball, and he's always high and tight with it. He's always protecting that football while taking, contact and taking the blows. So he's just textbook protecting the ball. You never see him loose with the ball at all. The ball's never far away from the core of his body. And I think those are things that Chip is really valuing, as is Deshaun Foster, as you get into the bulk of the season. So love what I'm seeing out of Carson Steele.
Yeah, and to bring it to our next point, the wide receiving room, I want to start off with a guy that has been quiet through the first couple games. 2 catches, 22 yards leading into this game, and then Cam Brown just blows up on the first play. It's good to see him back.
Yes.
Former Texas A&M transfer. And you remember when we had Jerry Neuheisel on the show, he was the first receiver that guy mentioned. That was not by accident, too. A guy that he claimed has not dropped a ball at UCLA since he has been there. A guy that has been through the thick of it, really has been a part of the fabric of UCLA turning around its program. It was just good to see a veteran guy, a guy the fans are familiar with, that we've rooted for time and time again, come away with a big-time touchdown catch on that. What was that play like? And do you think we can see a little bit more of Cam Brown going to this Utah game, especially with a veteran, experience that he can bring to the table?
Yeah, well, what I really loved was with Cam Brown, he burst on the scene 2 years ago. We all remember that Fresno State game. He kind of set the Rose Bowl on fire. And then we were just waiting. We've been waiting for him to sort of replicate that over a multi-game sequence and just see what he's absolutely capable of. So it was just great to see him re-emerge, if you will. I think he had a great spring, great fall, to Jerry Neuheisel's point. But I love that Chip dialed it up for him on the first play because, again, from kind of that chess master perspective, Utah's watching this film. Oregon State's going to be watching this film. Washington State's going to be watching this film. And the fact that he now, as an opposing team, you now have to think about Cam Brown. You saw Sturdivant. You saw Loya. Ford is going to play a huge role. You saw Norwood. Now you got to worry about yet another element. And in the event that UCLA goes 5 wide in certain passing situations, you're now in a situation where everybody needs to be accounted for. Everybody has the potential to take it all the way to the house. And that's what I really love what I saw. He ran a really smooth route, was really open, and finished it off. And so I think if there are some really unique packages now, Will, if you start stacking wide receivers, if you go kind of 3 stack in one particular side of the field, think about a Sturdivant, Loya, Cam Brown kind of 3 receiver stack. I mean, each guy can blow the top off the defense, and you start having them deviate, go deep, go intermediate, go short. You're really going to overwhelm secondary and nickel type packages with that situation because you don't know who is going to be the home run guy, who's going to be intermediate and whatnot. So the fact that he was able to get Cam Brown involved, I think it's only going to make Cam Brown even more confident in and slot into that kind of wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type of rotation.
Yeah, finished the day 2 catches, 74 yards, and that touchdown that we previously referred upon. J.Michael, man, he makes his catches when he does, and they always are splash. 2 catches, 60 yards. Each were 30 yards apiece, flat, including that touchdown catch in the end zone. This guy's in rarefied air, man. I mean, it's only been 3 games, and just the flashes of what this guy brings to this team, we've never seen anything like it, man. Is there anyone you can compare him to outside of Stokes, maybe in your fandom for UCLA?
Well, the only guy that comes to mind that he reminds me of in terms of size, hands, and just overall explosiveness was Brian Pulley-Dixon. Oh. And Brian Pulley-Dixon was obviously the complimentary wide receiver in the heyday of UCLA in the late 90s with Danny Farmer, with Freddie Mitchell. Those were kind of Cade McNown's 3 favorite targets. Pulley-Dixon was a bigger guy, 6'5", long, lanky, had great hands, and he had great explosiveness. But I think, when I look at a Brian Pulley-Dixon, and I look at a J.Michael Sturdivant is sort of better on every axis. When you talk about speed, when you talk about hands, when you talk about route running and precision there, when you just talk about his ability to kind of get open, just absolutely remarkable. His ability to get separation. So Pulley Dixon is the other guy in terms of that archetype, but in terms of just raw athlete, we are seeing a very special young man, and that's always been sort of the one position group, Will, that has been a little bit dormant for UCLA in the last 25 to 30 years. They've had great spots there. We mentioned Lasley, Jordan Payton, Craig Bragg, Freddie Mitchell. We've talked about so many of these guys, but when you think about a Pac-12 power, when you think about West Coast, you think that there's just going to be this recycling, this reloading of big-time wide receivers of the skill position. For whatever reason, it just quite hasn't been as seamless for UCLA. Hopefully, Sturdivant now starts a trend where other guys want to sort of join in and can see this Chip Kelly offense really thrive. In many ways, Will, Sturdivant is a trailblazer because even Chip Kelly's great Oregon offenses, it was all about the running backs. It was all about the tight ends. Rarely did they have a great true wide receiver, one type of a figure that able to get Chip's offense out in space. So we're seeing sort of an element of the Chip Kelly offense we really haven't seen before of like, what do you do with a great pro prospect at receiver? So I think that Sturdivant is actually going to set the trail for a lot of other guys to think about coming to UCLA, and it's just so exciting.
It is. And the only guy I can really reference from a pass catching standpoint is the great Mercedes Lewis. Completely different positions, but just in terms of physicality, when you see it, you know it. That guy was a pro the second he stepped on a field
for sure.
UCLA. Sturdivant's the same way when it comes down to it. So I see a lot of similar comparisons.
They're built. Mercedes was a little thicker, but to your point, Will, it was a guy that there was a wow factor there. And obviously, Mercedes doesn't have the speed of Sturdivant. Sturdivant didn't have the strength of Mercedes Lewis, but yes, there was that wow factor of this is someone very, very special. It's going to do some very special things, not just in Westwood, but beyond.
Both physical freaks, man. And let's take it to the defensive side of the ball. And this is per Ben Bolch's article. Defense has really been the Achilles heel of this team dating back, to the Chip Kelly era, the beginning of it. This is from Ben. UCLA has held all three opponents under 20 points for the first time since the 2009 season to start off the year. Talk to me about the defense. We didn't get a lot of the starters, but what we saw from the starters was fantastic. Latu had that 25-yard interception. We're nearly punching in. The Murphy twins were getting involved. Shout out to Donavyn Pellot, too. Came in on a really nice sack on a safety corner blitz type of scenario. Talk to me what you saw from the defense, because I thought they were outstanding as well.
They were outstanding, Will. And one of the things that I was sort of mentioning, I think Ben Bolch said it really well in terms of the kind of the three straight. One of the things that I was mentioning in my writing this week was I wanted to see just a sound situational football out of the defense, particularly the secondary, but also the front seven. And that's what we got. And we got a team that was very dominant early in this game, 3-and-outs, turnovers, really just suffocated this NC Central team from the start. And what was very encouraging was that you saw the same outcomes from the same schemes with different players. And that's when you know you're building a system, because there was an interchangeability of the parts. You saw the same aggressiveness from the front seven in terms of rushing the quarterback, both up the middle as well as off of the edges. You saw running back containment, and then you saw the secondary play really well, sound man-to-man situational football with their one-on-one matchups with the receivers. And so the fact that there wasn't this significant drop-off, not just in terms of outcomes, but also in terms of discipline. It was a relatively clean game from a penalty standpoint. There weren't really any boneheaded mistakes. So the fact that you got a very comprehensive, smooth performance speaks to the coaching, that regardless of who's out there, they're all being programmed the same way. They're all following the same scheme. They're all playing to their strengths. And again, this front seven is absolutely nasty, Will. And the fact that through 3 games, this team is only giving up 10 points a game. I understand who the competition is, but this is an incredible start to the season, considering how the game of college football has changed so much in the last 6 or 7 years. It's hard to give up 10 points a game to air at this stage, you know, when you've got all these spread offenses. So it was very encouraged to see the defense. I think their confidence, everybody's confidence is at an all-time high right now, whether it's the quarterbacks, whether it's the RBs, the wide receivers, and whether it's that defense going into Utah week, which is exactly where you want to be.
Going into Utah week and the defense is humming. This is also per Ben's article. Check it out on the LA Times. We have 8 turnovers and 27 tackles for a loss through 3 games. That is damn impressive for UCLA. Keep that rolling. I think we have one of the top, front sevens within the Pac-12, within the West Coast in general. So a lot of great things coming from UCLA. That pretty much does it for the wrap-up, man. I think we covered it. It was a blowout from the beginning. Not a lot of great, storylines, I would say, outside of just the starters and the reserves getting in there. Any follow-up thoughts on this blowout of a victory for our UCLA Bruins?
Will, I think it was, as we talked about, it's business as usual, but I want to kind of take a pass, and take a breath here and step back and sort of look historically at sort of where we are. And what was significant about this victory was really twofold. One is it's the first time in the Chip Kelly era that he's over 500. Now, Chip is now 30-29. And think about the first 2 seasons that he had, 3-9 and 4-8 to start, 7-17. And now over the last 3.5 years, let's call it, because the COVID year was a half year, to go from 7-17 to get past the 500 mark, I don't think is something that should be forgotten or just brushed aside. Really historic win for Chip. And it also brings us to my second point. We are in the midst. It may be hard to believe, given how polarizing Chip can be. You and I know how important he is to this team. We're so pro-Chip in terms of where this future is going. But obviously, he can be polarizing at times. Sometimes, he plays coy with the media. He's books and ball, which we love, but some other fans may not appreciate as much. A lot of questions about his ability to recruit in the transfer portal, yada, yada. But when you look at this now, Will, we are in the midst of the 3rd greatest run of UCLA football in the last 35 years. If you date back to the start of the 21 season, UCLA has won 20 out of their last 28 games. That has only been bested twice. The 97-98 season when UCLA won 20 out of 24 with Bob Toledo and McNown, which was the heyday, going back-to-back Cotton Bowl and Rose Bowl, and then 13-14 with Mora when he won 20 out of 26. And bookended it with a win in the Sun Bowl and then a win in the Alamo Bowl. So we are at the 3rd best stretch run here, 20 out of 28 games with Chip. We haven't quite had that signature bowl victory yet, so it might not feel that way. But we are in the midst of a Bruin renaissance here, which is even more significant considering this impending move to the Big Ten. So lots to be excited about. Let's see if that signature win, obviously got that win against Utah last year at the Rose Bowl, got the win against Washington at the Rose Bowl. Does it begin with a signature road win this week to really start putting an exclamation mark on this incredible run that Chip has put together?
Yeah, and I think it's just beginning. If you look at Dante Moore coming in, being a
absolutely
the best is yet to come there. The transfer portal, what he's been able to secure from that, Latu's, Sturdivant, Charbonnets, you name it. These type of players coming into Westwood, then going on to the NFL. And then, just like you said, more potential signature wins, going to play bigger programs on bigger stages in bigger areas. So it's a lot of great things going on. But Bruin Bible, we are officially out. We will be coming to you guys this Friday. Make sure to check us out. We're on 1090 The Mightier, ESPN Radio. We'll have a Utah preview. We likely will have a guest for this one because it's such a big game. So stay tuned for that. But get home safe. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we look forward to speaking with you guys later in the week. Bruin Bible listeners, we've got a special sponsor for today's episode. It is AG1. AG1 has been something that I've really enjoyed using in my spare time. 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole source food nutrients in one scoop that you can use into your water. You stir it up. I use it before my workouts, before I start my day, and it has totally given me the energy I need to do the little things in life, like going to work, getting extra, an extra boost, a second wind, if you will, for a workout. Before I play pickleball with my friends, it puts you in a good spirit of mind, and you're doing the healthiest possible thing by putting AG1 in your body. Make sure to check us out and get a special deal with the Bruin Bible. It's www.drinkag1.com/Bruin Bible to get the special deal that we provide. Once again, www.drinkag1.com/Bruin Bible to get that special deal. Now, back to the Bruin Bible.